Hello everyone and welcome to my Mr. Pandaria Rogue leveling guide, where I'll talk about the different specializations, but also compare them, the different glyphs and talents I prefer to use, and of course some useful tips and tricks. By the time we reach level 10 we can choose our specialization. Subtlety is sadly not great, only for PvP, where combat is amazing because of Blade Flurry, so you can activate this and cleave up to 4 additional enemies. Assassination won't be able to cleave like you can as combat, but then again, you will be able to kill one specific target in next to no time, and sometimes you won't be able to stack the enemies anyway, and then you won't benefit much from having your Blade Flurry. I've decided not to include subtlety because I don't find it useful for leveling, but here you see assassination in action at level 10, and yeah, I'm basically one-shotting everything. I know I'm using heirlooms, but I haven't enchanted these items. And if you weren't using heirlooms, you would still be able to kill these in next to no time. At low level I don't really use my stealth ability, even if I will be able to ambush these targets, then because my mutilate is also doing so much damage, I'll pretty much be one-shotting them no matter what ability I'm using. Therefore I don't really like to use my stealth, because it's also reducing my movement speed when I activate it. How about combat? Well, when I'm fighting one target at a time, I'm never activating my Blade Flurry. But what you can do is to simply activate your Blade Flurry and try to body pull as many as possible. Make sure they're of course not evading, but if you can stack 4 or 5 and you have evasion or another important cooldown, you should easily be able to take them down. Yeah, it is efficient leveling and it is better compared to assassination, but it also requires you to be stacking the enemies, else your Blade Flurry isn't really that beneficial. However, as we are leveling up, I feel like Blade Flurry also becomes better and better, especially because assassination won't all of a sudden be able to one-shot these enemies, so even though our killing speed will be slower, then you will also be able to kill 4 or 5 in probably the same time as you could kill 2 as assassination. By the way, a small tip, when you're killing someone, then remember if there's leftover combo points, you can still use these as you're running to the next enemy. So for example, to activate your slice and dice or recuperate. In a moment I'll also show you my talent and Glyph Tree and then compare the different specializations at higher levels. But before I talk about these, then I would also like to highlight that the quickest way to level a rogue is definitely going to be by questing and farming creatures in the open world. Therefore I'm always using a leveling guide, and the one I'm using right here will work from level 1 to 90. If you would like to try this out yourself, make sure to use the link below this video, where it will redirect you to where you can download and try it for free. Alright, the moment we reach level 15 we can choose our first talent, and this is how my talent tree usually looks like when I'm leveling up a rogue. The first choice is definitely not a bad decision, especially because you will then have more energy for our second attack, where the second option is mainly for PvP, so you can cheap shot many targets or do different kind of CCs. The reason why I like Night Stalker is because first off, you're increasing the damage done by your ambush, but you will also be moving faster when you're using your stealth, where stealth will usually also reduce your movement speed, but this is no longer the case. And this makes this talent so important, especially because later on you would also like to use your stealth a lot more. I never picked Deadly Throw, as you will be using your combo points, and we already have another way to interrupt the targets with our kick. Nerve Strike is an amazing choice. Whenever your kidney or cheap shot ends, the damage done by that target will also be reduced by 50% for 6 seconds. In other words, if you're using these two stunts, you will be taking a lot less damage, and this is useful for always sustaining at high health. Combat Readiness isn't a bad choice either, and I always choose between these two, and it depends on the fight. Because with Combat Readiness, you can simply activate this whenever you would like to reduce the damage taken, and you don't need to stun the enemies, and you can pretty much time it for whenever you're going low or you don't have other important cooldowns ready. At 45 we can choose Elusiveness. This is amazing, as you can use it whenever you're about to take a lot of damage. For example, if your Cloak of Shadow isn't ready when you're fighting casters. But be aware, by using Feint you will also be spending a bit of energy that you can't spend on doing more damage. Leeching Poison is something I don't really like. We already have other poisons that is amazing, and on top of this you usually kill the target so quickly that you won't really be able to apply the poison and benefit much from being able to heal yourself. Remember, we already have a self-healing that is absolutely amazing, which is Recuperate that only requires combo points. Why I like Cheat Death is because this is a passive, and whenever I drop below 10% health, I will also reduce my damage taken by 85% for 3 seconds, enough time for me to also react and maybe use a Vanish to prevent a death. Cloak and Dagger is a passive where you will always teleport behind the target as long as you're within 40 yards, and you're of course using either Ambush, Garrote or Cheap Shot. The downside is that it also requires you to be in stealth, so if you're fighting many targets, you won't benefit much from this. Where Shadow Step, yeah, you can use it and it's only a 20 seconds cooldown, but I mainly like this for PvP as well, so you can step to a target and instantly kick or do a Cheap Shot or Garrote. What I always choose is Burst of Speed. No cooldown, only requires 15 energy, and it increases your movement speed by 70% for 4 seconds. So you can use this if you need to get away from a sticky situation, but you can also use it to quickly gather many enemies and then benefit from your Blade Flurry. I don't really like dirty tricks, as I'm not using Gouge and Blind that often, especially because I don't really need to CC the targets, as I'm not really struggling. In PvP, it can be pretty decent. I don't like this poison either, as we already have other ways to stun. At the same time, you mainly won't be able to apply 4 of those debuffs before the target is dead anyway. Where Prey on the Weak is my go-to choice, also because we already have Nerve Strike, so not only will our Kidney Shot and Cheap Shot reduce the target's damage taken, but it will also increase their damage taken during the effect. Next up, my different glyphs. At low level I like Glyph of Sprint, as it increases the speed by an additional 30%. This is amazing before you unlock Burst of Speed at level 60. An absolute must-have is Glyph of Deadly Momentum, as every time you kill someone that grants experience or honor, you will also refresh your Slice and Dice and Recuperate. On top of this, I also like Glyph of Recuperate, so it heals for an additional 1%. But it is optional, as you can choose many other things, for example Glyph of Evasion to increase the duration by an additional 5 seconds. Another option is to replace your Glyph of Sprint with Evasion by the time you reach level 60 and unlock Burst of Speed. For minor glyphs I like Safe Fall, so I can fall even further without taking damage, but also applying my poisons 50% faster. It is not a big deal, but it is something that helps you overall. And of course also being able to run on water whenever I activate my sprint. What I also like is Disguise, so whenever I pickpocket a humanoid target, I will also copy their appearance for 5 minutes. This is pretty nice, especially if you don't like your current appearance on your own character. Next up, I'll compare Assassination and Combat at level 60 and then 85 when we're going to level in Mist of Pandaria zones. Here I'm leveling as Combat, but the downside is that when you get to Outland content, a lot of the creatures can't just be stacked that easily. Well, it is a possibility, but you will also need to spend a lot of time trying to gather them together. However, single target wise, you're not doing bad as Combat, you're actually doing pretty amazing damage, so it is still a decent specialization. What you might also end up encountering quite often is many casters, and here you won't really benefit from having Blade Flurry, as you can't hit them anyway, simply because they're standing far away and casting spells at you, and this can be quite deadly, and therefore I'll most likely have to vanish in such a situation. In this case I'm swapping back to Assassination, and it has been dominating ever since level 10 when it comes to single target kills. But you can see my damage isn't that great when I'm all of a sudden also fighting 2 enemies at the same time. So I guess you can imagine if we for example add 3 or 4 at the same time, it's not going to be a good situation at all. Yeah, you will be able to kill 1 target fast, but you also have 3 or 4 hitting you, and this could result in you end up dying as well. That being said, we always have our Zap, Blind, Kick, Gouge and different stunts, so you can easily take care of 3 or 4 at the same time. You just won't be able to do damage to all of them at the exact same time. So at level 60, there isn't really a specialization I would recommend you to play, because both of them are doing fine, and it all depends on your playstyle and what you like the most. How about when we reach level 85 and start leveling up in the new Mist of Pandaria zones? Well, single target wise, I feel like Combat is doing awful. Or well, I don't really like the damage, at least not when we compare it to for example pulling 4 or more targets at the very same time. Here you'll be blasting, especially if you also activate your Adrenaline Rush, and of course also making sure you activate your evasion. If you can do something like this, you can always pull more than 10 targets at the same time because you're doing insane damage, and you also have a decent amount of survivability because you're dodging every single attack. But let's be real, there's going to be competition for creatures, and there will also be locations where you can't always just pull 5 to 10 enemies at the same time, and this is where combat starts to struggle, and where assassination are doing way better. If we for example look back at level 60, combat and Assa were doing pretty close to each other, but when we talk about level 85 and above, well, then assassination are probably killing targets twice as fast. And this is a huge difference, because we won't always just be able to pull those 5 enemies at the same time and benefit from having Blade Flurry. This is why I mainly level as this specialization when I'm in Mist of Pandaria zones, but sometimes also in Cataclysm and Wrath of the Lich King zones, so starting at level 68, because there's going to be way more situations where you'll just fight one target at the same time. But up to around level 68, I would most likely level as combat and then swap to assassination until I reach max level. For those of you still sticking around, as you can see here, assassination are also not doing that great when it comes to cleaving creatures in Mist of Pandaria zones, even though we have Fan of Knife. So I hope you enjoyed this rogue leveling guide. On my channel you can find leveling guides for all the other classes, and of course also many other useful Mist of Pandaria videos and guides, so make sure to check those out and subscribe to get notified the next time I post a new video. Peace!